Let me start with a question. What was your favorite thing about 4th of July? Was it the food, the parades, maybe Bruce Springsteen on repeat? Or was it the fireworks? I think for many of us, it's a great excuse for us to hang out with family, eat way too much, and blow up stuff without anybody calling the cops. For me, one of my favorite things is just being outside with my family, keeping it simple, nice and classy. So on Friday night, we were in our driveway with a little fire pit, all set to make some delicious s'mores. We had just lit off, some small fireworks, nothing crazy, a couple bottle rockets here and there, a few sparklers, and these little tiny things called Kraken critters. Anyone here heard of those? Oh, one in the back, maybe one up here. Amazing. Okay. Well, if you haven't, you're not missing much. They're not very impressive. They just kind of fizzle, do a little sizzle, but there's zero pop. Me trying to impress my kids, I was a little disappointed. But they were loving it. They were loving it. It was one of those small, sweet family moments that felt just right. Till I looked up and noticed my neighbor standing there, and I watched him bend down, light this massive firework. It's one of those that you hear it, goes up, and you got some time, check your watch, eat a burger, run inside the house, go to the bathroom, come back outside, eat another burger, and then boom, this huge, massive explosion lights up the sky, right? It's the one that makes, your chest kind of rattle, and the one where your dog, decides that he or she completely hates you, right? That type of firework. I found myself thinking in that moment, this guy really knows how to do fireworks on the 4th of July. Here I am just lighting birthday candles. Not even lighting them, just the ones, those fake ones. They blow out and they relight. They're cute. That's what I was doing. I found myself comparing my fireworks show with my neighbor's fireworks show. Just moments before, everything was completely fine. And then I found myself in this place of comparison. Isn't that the world we live in? It's not just with fireworks. We're constantly measuring ourselves against the people around us. Because if you're not crushing goals, building a brand, or at least living your best life with a latte in hand, are you even trying? If we're honest, we would admit that we're trained to believe that greatness means more. It means bigger, faster, and louder. And if you're not ahead, then clearly you're behind. But then we meet Jesus. And Jesus has this incredible, frustrating, but beautiful way of flipping everything upside down. Because in the kingdom of God, greatness doesn't look like getting to the top. It looks like getting low. It doesn't sound like applause. It sounds like quiet service. It's not about being admired, but being available. And as it turns out, Jesus is not all that impressed with how many followers you have unless you're willing to carry a towel and wash feet. In Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 28, two of Jesus' disciples try to lock in front row seats in the kingdom. And Jesus responds by teaching them, and really us, that real greatness has nothing to do with status, but everything to do with sacrifice. So whether you're a high school student trying to stand out or someone who just retired, this message is for you. Because Jesus isn't looking for the impressive. He's looking for the faithful. So let's check it out together. Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 28. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons. And kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Say that these two sons of mine are to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your kingdom." Jesus answered, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." He said to them, "You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, to understand this passage, we need to take a quick step back and look at what's happening in the chapters leading up to it, because it gives us some very important insight into what the disciples are thinking, what they're expecting, and why their request for greatness is so far off the mark. So we're going to start back in Matthew chapter 16 with a guy named Peter. He's a key disciple, a good friend of Jesus, and he boldly declares to Jesus, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And this is a huge, huge moment. It's the first time a disciple publicly recognizes Jesus as the Messiah, the long-awaited Savior promised throughout the entire Old Testament. And it's a declaration of faith that hits the bullseye, and the good thing is that Jesus affirms it. He says, "Blessed are you, Simon." But right after this, Jesus begins to reveal what kind of Messiah he actually is. And he is one that must suffer, be rejected, and die. And Peter, who just got the answer right moments before, immediately rebukes him. Why? Because Peter, like many Jews of that time, expected the Messiah to be a military conqueror, not a suffering servant. They pictured someone who would overthrow Rome and not be executed by it. And this shows us something important. It shows us that the disciples believed in Jesus, but they still misunderstood his mission. Then we jump up to Matthew chapter 17, and things get a little more intense. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a mountain, and they witness this thing called the Transfiguration. And this is where Jesus' face shines like the sun. His clothes become dazzling white, and he's even next to Moses and Elijah up there. And in short, in this moment, Jesus pulls back the veil and he gives James, John, he gives them a glimpse of his divine glory. You see, to the disciples, this would have felt like confirmation that Jesus really was the king they were hoping for. He would be powerful, glorious, and of course, he would be untouchable. And as you can imagine, their expectations for a kingdom with honor and authority are now soaring, much like that firework I explained at the beginning. Everything is super high. And then we fast forward to Matthew chapter 20, and Jesus is predicting his death for a third time. It's not a metaphor. He's not being poetic. He's not joking around. He's clear. He's specific. And still, the disciples don't get it. Because as we see in the very next moment, James and John, they ask Jesus for the seats of honor in his kingdom. So with all that buildup, Peter's bold confession, the glimpse of glory at the Transfiguration, Jesus' repeated warnings about his death, you'd think that the disciples might start to grasp what kind of kingdom Jesus is really bringing. But instead, immediately after Jesus predicts his suffering for the third time, two of his closest friends, closest followers, closest disciples step forward not to comfort him, not to prepare, but to ask and lobby for these top seats in the kingdom. And at first it seems shocking, but when you really stop and think about it, it's not all that unfamiliar. Because we live in a world that teaches us to pursue the same thing. From the time we're young, we're taught to push ahead, rise above, and make something of ourselves. The culture around us says if you want to matter, then you need to get noticed. You need to do something greater than what everyone else is doing. And I think I have a good story in my own life to share with you that will prove this point. And it was during my 3rd year teaching at a Christian international school in Malawi. I had just gotten married. We were back from the honeymoon, had that newlywed glow, was in full effect, and I was feeling, of course, like I'm the man. I'm the man. And I don't really know what, came across me on this particular day, right? I had the wife, maybe I was thinking that. I had the ring, I was ready to show off to the world. But on this particular day, I was ready to show off to my students. I don't know. So I said to them at the very beginning of class, guys, check this out. This ring, it's indestructible. It's made of tungsten carbide. They were like, what? I don't know what that is. They looked skeptical. As you can imagine, middle schoolers not really knowing what they. So I took it a step forward because nothing says mature adult like wanting that desire to, impress middle schoolers. So I decide, I'm telling them, no, seriously. If I throw this thing on the ground, on this tile floor, it's going to bounce right back up. Check it out. First bounce, bing. Comes back to my hand, and I'm like, see? I told you. They're like, prove it. Do it again. That was luck. So I'm like, all right, bet. Second time, bing, comes back up. Yeah, I am the man. They're going to give me a standing ovation. Third time, no bing. A little bit different of a response. Instead of the ring in my hand, I'm looking down, and there's a ring that looks like it had just gone through a war. So I pick it up. Sure enough, it's bent, it's cracked, and it's missing a chunk. My beautiful, meaningful, symbolic, till death do us part wedding band was now a broken reminder of how badly I wanted to look impressive. In my attempt to show off how great I was, I just showed off my stupidity. Isn't that what we've all been taught? That if you want to be someone, you've got to prove something, whether it's your ring, your resume, your bank account, your follower count, your outfit, your personality. Our culture has hardwired us to believe that the more impressive we look, the more valuable we are. And so we throw things down to make a point, right? We bounce our accomplishments in front of others, hoping they'll come back up as applause. And our culture's success is defined by how far up the ladder we climb, how much influence we have, and how many people answer to us. We see the same from James and John in verses 20 and 21 when they asked Jesus, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left. They weren't asking to know Jesus more. They were asking for status. They were asking for position. They were asking for influence. And it's not hard to see why. It's because they're still thinking in earthly terms. In their minds, Jesus is about to take power in Jerusalem, and they want to make sure they will be his top people, his top advisors. But here's the irony. Jesus had just told them he was heading toward a cross, not a throne. And yet they still think that greatness is about rising above and not laying down. Aren't we guilty of doing the same thing? We want to be successful parents, admired employees, spiritual leader, which isn't a bad thing. But too often, there's something within us, something that we won't say out loud, and it's that desire to be the best no matter the cost. And that's where the problem lies, in our motive. Jesus says you don't know what you're asking. James and John, they were chasing status while Jesus was preparing for suffering. The interesting part is Jesus doesn't just correct their request. He turns the conversation towards something deeper. He wants them to understand that greatness in the kingdom comes with a cost. And so I'm going to ask you a question. Where in your life are you trying to climb higher when Jesus is asking you to kneel? This leads us into verse 22. Jesus answered, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" Again, this is a powerful moment. But I want us to just pause and appreciate how confidently James and John answer, "We are able." Because I wonder if they actually knew what they were signing up for, if they actually knew what Jesus was talking about. Because if Jesus asked that question today, it might go something like, "Yeah, Lord, what kind of cup are we talking about? Talking about a trophy? Maybe a Stanley Cup? Or are you talking about an iced venti macchiato? I'll take it any day, every day, all day." But Jesus wasn't talking about something refreshing. He was talking about something refining. It's not a cup of glory, but instead it was a cup of suffering, the path of service, sacrifice, and surrender. Now, just for a little background on what the cup is, in the Old Testament, the cup was a symbol for God's judgment and suffering. And in just a few days, Jesus himself will pray in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." So when Jesus asks, "Can you drink the cup?" he's asking, are you willing to suffer like me? To be rejected, humbled, poured out for others like I am? James and John boldly respond, "We're able." But they don't realize what they're signing up for. They don't realize that they're signing up for sacrifice. They wanted a crown, but Jesus was offering a cross. Again, this is where we need to pause and reflect and ask ourselves, are we willing to follow Jesus not just to the mountaintop, but into the valley of suffering and service as well? Because drinking the cup isn't just about enduring intense and difficult times. It often shows up in the small everyday choices we make to live like Jesus. It's the husband who chooses to engage with his family at night, even when he's exhausted from work, rather than checking out. It's the leader who faithfully serves behind the scenes with no spotlight, no recognition, and no applause. It's the student who invites the lonely kid to sit with them at lunch, risking social awkwardness to show kindness and value. It's the retired woman who regularly prays for the next generation, taking time to handwrite notes of encouragement to young families and people in the community. These acts of love and faithfulness, that's drinking the cup. It's choosing service over status, obedience over convenience, and others over self. In the kingdom of God, these unseen sacrifices, they're not forgotten. They're honored. True greatness always costs something. And Jesus is asking us, are you willing to give yourself away like I am? Now, looking back at our passage, you'd think that after a conversation like this, where Jesus is explaining all this suffering and sacrifice, that the disciples would be quiet. They'd be humbled and a little reflective, right? They don't. It's not even close. And honestly, it does remind me of something a little familiar. You ever been in a group project? Do you remember those? You know the dynamic. There's always that one person, they do 5% of the work but want 95% of the credit. Meanwhile, someone else has practically written a thesis, right? They created this color-coded slide deck and they baked cookies for the whole audience, right? And then the group slacker, he rolls in or she rolls in, right? And then when the presentation is over, they say something like, "Man, we crushed it!" And the rest of the group's like, "We crushed it?" They're like looking around like, "Who? We? Like you did nothing." Their holy thoughts change, right? To like, you were completely worthless to us. This happens when someone gets credit for what we think we deserve. And that's what's happening with the other disciples. James and John try to grab the spotlight, and the others are furious. Not because they're more mature, but because they wanted the credit for themselves. And this leads us to this, that greatness without grace breeds rivalry. I want us to look at verse 24. And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. Why? Because they wanted those seats too. They weren't furious because the request was wrong. They were furious because they didn't think of it first. This is what happens when we use that comparison to define greatness. Someone else's success makes us feel small. Their spotlight becomes our insecurity. And that's the danger of chasing greatness without grace. It turns friends into rivals and teammates into threats. It makes us root for people to fail just so we feel like we're winning. And I saw this firsthand during my college baseball days. It was back when I played baseball at Azusa Pacific out in California. I was a second string shortstop behind a guy named Lane. He had been there for 4 years and he had put his time in. And even though I thought I was better, faster hands, better range, I remember our coach telling me he's going to give Lane a shot because he had earned it. I was told to still compete, to still compete for the position, but I'll be completely honest. I didn't want to compete. I just wanted the spot. It was mine in my head. And that's when it all started. Lane was a great guy. He was a good leader, solid teammate, but I had made it up in my mind that he wasn't good enough. And I let my desire to start slowly turn into resentment. And so what I did was I minimized him so I could justify my attitude. A few weeks into the season, Lane gets hurt. I get my shot. I now have this starting position, and I did pretty well. But then that one game came. Struck out 3 times, made 2 errors in the field. My confidence completely tanked. And then you know what happened next. The coach takes me out, puts Lane in, right? And then he crushes this massive monster home run. Like the one that goes to the moon, this like missile shot. And I'm watching it leave the yard, and I just knew my starting spot's gone. And it was. And instead, I was given this pinch runner role, which in my mind, I thought I was way too good for. So that's when my attitude hit rock bottom, and I completely checked out. Most games, I stood at the end of the dugout. I didn't engage. I just kind of messed around. And then when it came time for playoffs, the roster had to be trimmed. So you know what happens? My coach pulls me aside, and he says, "You're not on it." And I'll never forget what he said next. He said, "It's not because of your ability. It's because you've completely checked out." And that crushed me. It crushed me not because I didn't deserve it, but because I did. I realized how my selfish ambition had stolen the joy of being a part of something bigger in that moment. In the book of James, chapter 3, verse 16, he speaks about this sort of thing when he warns us, "For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder in every vile practice." Worldly greatness always makes us compete. But kingdom greatness frees us to celebrate. So let me ask you another question. Are you measuring yourself by someone else's gifts, influence, or recognition? If so, I do have some encouragement for you. Jesus wants to free you from that treadmill. Because what he says to us is that there is plenty of room in his kingdom for all of us to be faithful. In our passage, what he says next isn't just the turning point of the conversation. It's the foundation of what it means to follow him. And it's something I think all of us need to hear. And this is where he redefines what true greatness is. Check out verses 25 through 27. But Jesus called them to him and he said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave." Jesus flips everything upside down. The world tells us, lead by being out in front of people, but Jesus is telling us, lead from behind people, serve them, wash their feet, carry their burdens, be with them. And then he says this in verse 28, "Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." That's the heart of the gospel. He didn't come to be elevated. He came to be emptied. He didn't come to take up a throne. He came to take up a cross. And he calls us to follow him in the same way. And that kind of greatness, it often looks nothing like what the world applauds. Instead, it looks something like this. It looks like the grandparent who shows up each week to cheer at games or recitals, building quiet trust and steady presence into their grandkids' lives. It looks like a single adult who serves faithfully in the background, running slides, watching kids, and cleaning up after the events, never asking for applause, never asking for recognition, or wanting anything outside of that. They just want to be faithful. It looks like a stay-at-home mom who has nothing left in the tank but still chooses to sit on the floor, look her child in the eyes, and give her full attention because she knows that loving well in the small moments matters. It looks like someone battling anxiety or depression who, despite the heaviness they carry, still show up at work, at church, with their family, and somehow they just keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's greatness in the kingdom. It's quiet, it's costly, it often is unseen, but it reflects the fullness of Jesus, his heart. And so again, I ask you a question. What kind of greatness are you chasing? The world says, climb higher, be first, get noticed. Jesus says, go lower, be last, serve others. And here's the good news. If you follow Jesus into that kind of greatness, you may not be known by the world, but you'll be known by the King. And one day he'll say to you, well done, good and faithful servant. And that's the greatness that lasts. Let's pray.